Let's move on and talk about a more troubling quarterback performance from this week, and that is what happened with Jordan Love against the Raiders after a pretty hot start for the Packers offense in terms of explosiveness. So even if you look back at the first few games they had this season, they were up near the top of the league in EPA per drop back, which is big plays, but they were middle of the road in success rate. So I think that they were really feasting on some of those explosives that they had hunted out over the first few weeks. And as that's come back to earth, I think we've gotten a more accurate read on what their offense looks like and what Jordan Love looks like in that offense. So going back and watching that Raider game, what did you see specifically that you think they're struggling with when they're dropping back to throw the ball?
Well, they miss Aaron Jones. They miss Aaron Jones and they miss all their offensive linemen. They've had so many offensive line struggles and different people playing, and it just looks like they're just absolutely not in a rhythm right now. And it's hard to pinpoint just watching that game because you watch the first two games, which I did because I've done some breakdowns with them or on them on YouTube. And he looked really comfortable in the offense. The plays were working. It was he threw 6 touchdowns in 2 games. And the last 3 games, for whatever reason, maybe they've started to figure out, defenses started to figure out like what's happening, or maybe I don't know, a little bit of regression. But when you have that many people in and out in the 5-game span on offense that they've been without some receivers. Sometimes they've been without some offensive line. So you really don't have the starting 11 playing at once. And Aaron Jones I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference because teams aren't going to just play like too high coverage every single time. And honestly, like give credit to the Raiders. Like they stuffed the run game. I think Dylan ran for like 3 yards a carry. I mean, it was good. So they sort of going into the game plan, they ended up saying, hey, we want Jordan Love to beat us throwing the ball. And they gave some outside completions here and there, and he took some shots, but he missed some shots. And it's just, it wasn't a really efficient performance at all.
The way that, so first drive they come out and they're using heavy personnel in the way that the Packers often like to use heavy personnel. And I'm sitting there like, oh, wow, it's 1st and 10 and they're playing nickel to their 12 personnel. I'm like, all right, well, we'll see. Why can't you run the ball? And they were running the ball pretty efficiently over those first couple drives. But I think the 3rd and the 4th drive, they had negative runs right at the start of the drive. Just Max Crosby blowing up plays. And now you're sitting there in 2nd and 12. It's 3rd and 12. You get off schedule. So I think that's exactly what we're talking about with the offensive line is banged up. You got new pieces in there. The tight ends are young. And so some of the asks that you're making of them in the run game, I think are still going to be a process. Like Luke Musgrave is a really good athlete. I think he's going to be a plus receiver, but that I think is going to be an ongoing process. And then again, no Aaron Jones. So some of those efficient runs from AJ Dillon that are going for 4.5, 5 yards on those first couple drives, those are potentially explosive plays if Aaron Jones is in the game. And now you're putting more on the quarterback. So I was surprised when I saw them running the ball so efficiently over the first couple drives. I was like, why didn't they just stick with this over the entire game? And then you watch the negative runs. And so that 3 yards a carry, the journey to that 3 yards a carry was fascinating because it's not 3 yards every single play. Nope. And so them being put in negative scripts on some of those drives, I think asks a lot of him. And there were a couple plays specifically that I wanted to ask you about where they're showing something and then they dropped back into some version of like Tampa 2, where there's the post runner and they were trying to hit some plays into that area of the field. And he just didn't look equipped with answers in those moments. So to me, the untrained eye, it feels like in moments where he gets a little bit spooked because he didn't know what the coverage was pre-snap, he's struggling to find the right answer when the initial plan within the play was not there.
That's exactly right. And sometimes, when you're planning for an offense to go out like an offensive game plan, and you go against like the Raiders, I don't know what the Raiders do in terms of like percentage breakdown on shell versus not, but it looked to me that all these beaters, these cover 2 beaters weren't there. So I don't know if that was the Raiders saying, hey, look, let's just play some more cover 2 against Jordan Love, have corners come up, like make them run the ball, be good about it. But it seemed to me like almost like the Raiders were saying, hey, we're just going to be in cover 2. We're going to be in that Tampa 2 where that post runner 41 runs through, which he's very athletic. But there were a few times you look back, they had a dagger behind it where you're just clearing out the mic that he missed on one of these throws. and he's trying to throw flat routes into cover two and stuff. And honestly, it comes down to play design. Like not every play is designed for cover two. I saw a lot of that cover two shell look like you were talking about. And so a lot of it's not on Jordan. You might not even have a good check down over the ball. Whereas a lot of their checkdowns, at least in the first two games that I watched in this game, a lot of it was to the flat and not great versus the flat. You still might get 2 or 3 yards, but obviously like those corners are clouded up. You don't want to be checking the ball down on flat routes. So you might have to hold it a half second more and Max Crosby gets to you, or you might have to throw it downfield a little bit more. And so I don't know if they were super equipped to beat cover two that game. And so I think those are those plays you're talking about where I'm just like, man, like it's difficult for a quarterback because we've been in those game plans before, man. Like we've been in where we have, we're expecting like 10% cover two. Okay. And a team's like 40% quarters, 30%, cover three, and 10% man, 10% two. So obviously 70% of our game plan is going to be quarters beaters and single high beaters. And when a team goes rogue and plays 50% cover two, well, you only have 5 or 6 plays that are cover two beaters. And you're sitting there like, dang, like we need to get our cover two beaters in. And that was a story about it. That was something that I thought Andy Reid did an amazing job at the 3 years I was there and continues to do. So they have their normal game plan, and it's not as crazy amount of plays as some people seem, but it like I wish you could see his call sheet because like front is awesome. It's like a mad genius. You flip it over and they've got like 2-minute red zone, but he always for some reason was like, hey, what are our answers versus cover two? Because a team could just pop cover two and there's only certain pass plays that are good at. And he'd have a box up in the top right corner or top or bottom right corner, and it would say cover two beaters. And he'd have like 30 plays listed. And I was like, that's genius. And they aren't like some crazy plays we haven't practiced. It's all the cover two beaters we did in training camp that we can easily get to versus cover two. And I thought that was always really, really cool. I'm wondering why coaches don't do that more.
I was looking at some of the numbers when you were talking because I was actually curious looking at some of the coverage stats. So the Raiders play about 35% man on third down, which is not atypical, right? Like a lot of teams are in that 35 or so rate on third down. Against the Packers, they played about 17% of their third down snaps in cover two, which is significantly more than normal. They played 58% cover three on third down, 8% man. So you go from playing 35% man on third down and trying to have some of those man answers to a team that played almost exclusively zone on third down. And I think you saw some of those issues creep up where he's dropping back and he's like, this is not what I had anticipated. This is not what we planned for. I don't have the right answer to this.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a struggle of coaching, or do you think that's a struggle of the quarterback not being able to pivot in those moments?
That's such a good question because obviously coaching, you want to be able to have the perfect play call at the perfect time for the perfect coverage. You know how much, you know how many times that happens in an NFL game? Like 3. So and I go back to like, let's talk about like, this is such a good discussion because let's go back to like during the week. Okay. Like for the people that don't understand, there's the ones and then there's the scout team. Okay. The ones get every single game rep. Okay. So if I'm the 2 and I'm the backup, I'm not running my offense at all. I'm running scout team for the starting defense. And then like take, for instance, the Chargers, they're running like Justin Herbert's running the starting offense. Okay. Do you know, like you probably have 40 plays on Wednesday, 35 plays. This is the starters. Okay. That they're reps in different periods, 35 plays on Thursday and 20 plays on Friday. So let's just call it 100 plays during the week that you're going to be practicing your game plan and it's carded up and the defense is carded up, scout team defense. And hey, this we're going to scout it up exactly what we think because we have a cover 3 beater and the scout team defense, you're going to play cover 3 and you're going to play cover 3 exactly how we think that, say we're playing the Raiders are going to play. And we're going to run this play and it's going to be wide ass open. Okay. So take that 100 times. You know how many times in a game that you call a play as an offensive coordinator or a quarterback coach or whatever, whoever's calling the play against that same look? I mean, it is like it maybe maybe once a game.
And that's when you know it's like that. Those are those we got him moments, but those
We
don't
got
happen
them
very often.
once a game. So, like, that's what I've always talked about quarterbacks. And I can't speak to Jordan because, quite honestly, there's not enough tape on him yet. This is his fifth start, sixth start, whatever it is. And there's not enough tape on him. But the quarterbacks I've always been around have always been really good in the gray. What does that mean, Chase? What does the gray mean? Well, so much of it, coaching is black and white. Do this or do that. Okay, here's what's going to happen versus cover three. You're going to throw it here. Here's what's going to happen versus cover three. You're going to that never happens. So don't be in the black and white. Live in the gray. Like if something else happens, okay, so what? Just make a play. Like that's where you want to be as a quarterback. And the best people I've been around, the Drew Breeses of the world, Justin Herbert, even Alex Smith, like the dude within the offense was just like, okay, cool. Like it might not be black or white, but it living in the gray means it might be a little murky, but I'm going to make a play. Like that's what I want to see Jordan Love get to.
You said 5 starts. There's already some initial panic. Panic may be a strong word. There is some uneasiness, I think, among the Packers fan base after watching these first 5 starts. A team that has had 30 straight years of Hall of Fame quarterback play essentially is not used to this sort of feeling. As a lifelong Bears fan, it's been very fun to watch for me. Like them having to live this life and just some of the uneasiness that it creates. Yeah. We have an interesting situation with Jordan Love, right? The way they extended his contract, he has a $7 million cap hit next year. They could potentially move on from him after this year if they wanted to. It's very, very early to start having any sort of big picture conversations or come to any sort of definitive conclusions about that. When you're thinking about him 5 games in and what his future looks like, are you a little bit concerned about what that may look like, how it may unfold? Or are we in a place where it's just way too early and patience is probably the thing that you need to preach?
I think it's way too early to tell. Patience is definitely what you want to preach, and I think the Packers knew that because, we were having this conversation off camera, and it's very interesting to me because now in a day and age where you have to play and play well, or you're just written off right away, like to me that's not fair to the young men that are out there like one of 32 in the world playing the position. And listen, I'm all for it. Like I'm part of the meeting now. If a guy's play needs to be criticized, like I'm gonna be real with you, like he needs to play better. However, I don't think we're in an environment right now that's really fair to a lot of these guys that are trying to find their way.
Mhm.
Like you look at like even like Josh Allen. Josh Allen's first year in the league, dude. No, like I was like, like can't, nope, not happening. Like to me, that's why I was like, and I was like and I was still playing. And look at him now. He's like top 3 quarterback in the league. Like some guys take longer to progress. Even Jalen Hurts is another great example. Justin Fields is starting to trend that way. I know you like that. I wanted to bring that up. But like stuff like that, like I just think it's too early to tell. Now it is, to me, it is interesting to me that they did the contract the way they did. And if for some reason, like he's got the whole year, like there's no talk of like they're going to see what they've got. But say for instance they meet in February if they're not in the or March if they're not in the Super Bowl, and all the minds of the building, LaFleur's in there, and they're talking, and be like, hey man, like I just don't think Jordan Love's the answer. Okay, so you got him on a $7.5 million deal, which is for the next year, which is a very like it's the high paid backup market. So you got a really good backup quarterback who can stay with the team. You're not like cap strapped, and you can go get a world beater if you want, because the way they've structured contracts, they ate it early and they have some financial freedom in 2024. So I think the Packers are in a really good spot. Obviously, they want to win, but their mindset, their thing is like, we got this year, man, to just like let him grow. Like we got to put the people out there to let like him go try to show who he is, make his way in the league. But it is you look back on the contract and you're sort of saying, all right, like the Packers probably won this one because they paid him a decent number this year, nothing crazy compared to starters around the
league. He got $13 million guaranteed. And so if you're trying to split the difference between what he was going to make and what the 5th-year option is, I think it's a kind of inspired decision by the Packers because you're avoiding the situation that the Giants did with Daniel Jones. where, okay, we're going to decline his 5th-year option because we just don't think he's going to be the guy. Obviously, they had more data on him than the Packers had on Jordan Love. But you run into an issue when he plays well enough that now you feel compelled to try to find an answer, but he's going to be hitting free agency. You got one franchise tag, and it created a pretty knotty, complicated situation for the Giants that now that they're not working through. I'm trying to be nice. That's my gracious way of framing what's happening with the Giants right now. And I think the Packers smartly said, we don't want to run into that. We want to give ourselves more flexibility. And if you're Jordan Love's agent, bird in the hand, I'll take the $13 million. Like, that's fine with me. So I think it was a very good way to handle this situation. And we'll see what happens. You know, this is one of those moments where you really hope, or you really wish that Aaron Rodgers didn't get hurt, and you have that extra 1st-round pick. You have some flexibility going into next year. So we'll see what happens. I do think that the injuries on offense and how mixed the personnel has been on the offensive line, not having Aaron Jones, you could feel his uneasiness in the pocket. And I think that Max Crosby is part of that. He was wrecking the game pretty consistently. But I think that the lack of talent along the offensive line, all the moving pieces along the offensive line, combined with his inexperience, I think you're seeing that stuff start to snowball a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree.